Right, let us begin. So our ranks are thinning out here in classroom. On Thursday, we're going to have a quiz, and so I expect most people will attend in person, so we'll get an idea of how things are going. Hey, Julian, not bad. So this week's topic, the internet, history of, and we opened discussion on some of the new formats that are appearing through streaming media. And we're also going to review for the quiz that's on Thursday. We'll take a look at the Kahoots again. Did everybody, I sent out an email with the links to the challenges, so those should be open until 10 o'clock on Thursdays for you to play and rehearse and get to know those questions and such. And so we can take a look at this item, which is up there, the Quiz 1 review. So that I put that up. It's got some slides and also those links to the Kahoot Challenges. All right. Everybody's here. Pardon me? If we just go back to last week, it's Quiz 1 review.
Okay.
Yeah. There it is. Okay. Let's see. Sorry, remind me of your name just because.
Michael.
Michael, hey. Michael Medina?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks. It's just, I usually see everybody else, just wanted to get that back in memory. We use a little attendance sheet here. Just there you go. And right, okay. So starting off with some review of the textbook for this chapter. So this is chapter 5 on the internet. And we're basically taking a quick overview of the development of the internet and some very key parts of its technical infrastructure, basically, that has opened the floodgates to streaming media, which has completely changed electronic media and broadcasting since all of this became possible. And next week we'll be talking about personalized media. So I think we would add into this history the diffusion of the smartphone technology starting around 2010, which has amplified all of the possibilities of media delivery through the internet rather than through typical terrestrial broadcasting distribution, which we've really confined ourselves to so far. So it's probably pretty widely known that the early technology of the internet was developed with defense and research in mind. The idea was to develop, from a defense perspective, a communication grid that could not be easily wiped out. So one that was distributed so that even if part of it was destroyed, other parts of it could continue to function. Which is a big difference from our broadcast networks where you wipe out transmitters, you're wiping out basically the infrastructure that fed all of the individuals. The internet is famously a much more interconnected and distributed network for distributing content. I guess, when I first heard about it in the mid-90s and such, there was a great celebration about how this was sort of democratized and was going to, liberalize the flow of information, and that, it was kind of a communication structure which could not be controlled. That was, early thinking about the internet and the web. But it seems like some countries like Iran, China, have pretty much been able to create a walled internet service where they can monitor and control what goes on. It's not, of course, 100% insulated from the rest, but it certainly sets to rest those ideas that this is an open architecture that really can't be controlled, because some countries are doing fine controlling it. And we have our own debates about net neutrality and such, which whether or not we choose to filter and control the content through a governmental agency or something, we definitely see commercial interests trying to build the internet out in a particular way, which in some eventual scenarios it might wind up looking like cable television, where you can pay for various layers or tiers of access, and the premium content that a lot of people are looking for will reside on a more expensive form of the internet, and the sort of grassroots type of communication with which we originally celebrated the internet might still exist, but it'll move at a slower pace with less convenience than the channels that Verizon and the big communication companies are trying to develop and protect economically, so that their investment will turn them into the new overlords. So back into the beginning of all this, and in fact, well, let's watch a video in a sec, but this will deal with the early protocols which were developed in order to connect computers together for research purposes. So remember, back at this time, computers would be, the cliche again, but they did exist, Colossus. They fill small rooms with less computing power than today's PCs, far less. So having a computer was something that typically only existed in research and university contexts. And so in order to make them more powerful, it was important to connect them up so that people could share information, research, and collaborate that way. So that was the original impetus with ARPANET, which is early connections. And what was so important connecting one computer up with another was developing transmission protocols so that one computer could talk to another, basically saying, oh, hello, I want to send you something, and it's going to come in this form. This will be first, this will be second. We'll split the information up into packets. And so this was pretty early on recognized as the most efficient way to move information through the network was to split it into packets with addresses on them. So imagine you want to send a very long, send a 500-page novel through the mail, the old mail system. You could send the whole thing in one giant bundle, and then risk if the mail system goes down, misdelivers or something, that file will never get there. Or you can split it up into smaller pieces, each with an address. It's like, this is piece number 1, and it's going to your home. This is piece number 2. This is piece number 3. It'll all move through the network along with all kinds of other pieces of data, basically bundles, and then it'll be reassembled over at the receiver's place. So this basic idea of splitting stuff up into packets and then sending them through the network that way still goes on today, and it goes on in mobile networks as well. So this is what allows for really efficient use of a smaller number of channels, because for instance in mobile, when I'm not talking, there'll be a certain amount of silence. Now a packet switch network can cram other people's communication into the silence. There's nothing going on while I'm not talking, and so you can use that channel to carry many more packets. And so this is the idea of packet switching is real important, and it's still used today in our modern 4G networks and stuff, and looking ahead to 5G. This is the way it works. So, and the other, so if we're talking inventors, Vint Cerf, as part of the TCP transmission control protocol group that put together that initial way of having computers talk to one another. And then another key inventor when we get to the World Wide Web, which is and basically an app that runs on the internet. It's a significant part of the internet traffic, but it is a protocol in itself. And this was developed by Berners-Lee, who was a researcher in a European physics lab called CERN, and he developed HTML, which is the World Wide Web coding language, which allows for hyperlinking, so clicking on one document and moving to the next document, and the www protocol, which, as you can see, is in the header of every address that you're using, which is basically telling the server that you're talking to, hey, this is my computer, it's running a browser, it wants information sent to me through this particular protocol. And so, from a humble, tech geek in a physics lab came this whole set of protocols on which the web runs, basically. So it's a pretty big and an influential invention. So we got a video just to break things up, and hopefully it's pretty good. Where is this in week 6 overview extras? Here it is. Let's just watch this.
The World Wide Web, where you're likely watching this video, is used by millions of people every day for everything from checking the weather, ordering food, and chatting with friends, to raising funds, sharing news, or starting revolutions. We use it from our computers, our phones, even our cars. It's just there, all around us, all the time. But what is it exactly? Well, first of all, the World Wide Web is not the internet, even though the terms are often used interchangeably. The internet is simply the way computers connect to each other in order to share information. When the internet first emerged, computers actually made direct calls to each other. Today, networks are all around us, so computers can communicate seamlessly. The communication enabled through the internet has many uses, such as email, file transfer, and conferencing. But the most common use is accessing the World Wide Web. Think of the web as a bunch of skyscrapers, each representing a web server, a computer always connected to the internet, specifically designed to store information and share it. When someone starts a website, they are renting a room in this skyscraper, filling it with information and linking that information together in an organized way for others to access. The people who own these skyscrapers and rent space in them are called web hosts, but anyone can set up a web server with the right equipment and a bit of know-how. There is another part to having a website without which we would be lost in the city with no way of finding what we need. This is the website address, which consists of domain names. Just like with a real-life address, a website address lets you get where you want to go. The information stored in the websites is in web languages, such as HTML and JavaScript. When we find the website we're looking for, our web browser is able to take all the code on the site and turn it into words, graphics, and videos. We don't need to know any special computer languages because the web browser creates a graphic interface for us. So in a lot of ways, the World Wide Web is a big virtual city where we communicate with each other in web languages, with browsers acting as our translators. And just like no one owns a city, no one owns the web. It belongs to all of us. Anyone can move in and set up shop. We might have to pay an internet service provider to gain access, a hosting company to rent web space, or a registrar to reserve our web address. Like utility companies in a city, these companies provide crucial services, but in the end, not even they own the web. But what really makes the web so special lies in its very name. Prior to the web, we used to consume most information in a linear fashion. In a book or newspaper article, each sentence was read from beginning to end, page by page, in a straight line until you reached the end. But that isn't how our brains actually work. Each of our thoughts is linked to other thoughts, memories, and emotions in a loose, interconnected network, like a web. Tim Berners-Lee, the father of the World Wide Web, understood that we needed a way to organize information that mirrored this natural arrangement. And the web accomplishes this through hyperlinks. By linking several pages within a website or even redirecting you to other websites to expand on information or ideas immediately as you encounter them, hyperlinks allow the web to operate along the same lines as our thought patterns. The web is so much a part of our lives because in content and structure, it reflects both the wider society and our individual minds. And it connects those minds across all boundaries, not only ethnicity, gender, and age, but even time and space.
Any thoughts on that? Do you guys buy the claim that our minds work as an interconnected set of ideas, emotions, and observations and stuff, and that the web kind of mirrors that? Yeah? Oh, okay. I personally don't know what to think about it, except that it is an interesting idea anyway, that that a free chain of associations can you know, in a technical system can model sometimes what's going on in our heads. Do you think that has any bearing on like falling down a rabbit hole when you're surfing the web? Julian, what do you think?
I mean, that's right where my brain was at, because I think about, I mean, some people do it with like YouTube. I do it with Twitter a lot of the time, where I'll click on one post, I'll go down the thread, go down another thread, and then you're down the rabbit hole. And it's like, it's kind of like if you're just like daydreaming and whatever thoughts just kind of keep popping into your head, that's where your train of thought is going. So, you know, it's not linear. It's definitely like all over the place.
I like the way you're using the term linear and stuff too. Do other people have that experience like Julian's talking about? Kira, yeah?
Yeah, like definitely. I feel like instead of it being Twitter, I'm that way on Instagram, because there's like an explore page, and that's just basically, it just like curates a page specifically for things that your friends like on Instagram or things that you like on Instagram, and it just kind of makes an entire section dedicated to what you like. So it's like a bunch of like cat videos or just
Right.
or clips of funny old rhymes or something like that. Like yeah, I get very like lost, and I think that's why they have screen time.
Right. I think you're right about that too. And it's interesting because you're commenting not only on the chain of associations like Julian was talking about, but also on the kind of what would you call it? I don't know, the garden that grows up around your personal interests, I guess. You know, in the sense that, you know, as these platforms learn more about our preferences, you know, we get surrounded more and more by stuff that we're interested in. I guess that's another thing you're talking about. Yeah. I heard a ding over in chat. Let's see if this is working. Okay, Chris says Wikipedia is another rabbit hole of nonlinear navigation. Yeah, it's that's also interesting. You know, and again, well, any other experiences with rabbit holes or with this particular, you know, way of consuming information? Pardon me? Reddit?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's so many threads. Like there's this one called Our Relationships, where people just post your their relationship problems.
Okay.
And it gets just really interesting. So you stay on there for like 2 hours just reading about people's problems.
Wow. Right. So it reminds me of Dear Abby as being, you know, like the one and only old media place where you could go for that kind of discussion, and then I guess Reddit probably explodes it and takes off all the all the restrictions that a newspaper would put on content. That's interesting too. There's an assumption here also that that hierarchy is like in the video that we were just watching, you know, with the analogy about skyscrapers and I got the sense that things were a little bit more organized in their model than my impression of Reddit is, for instance, or of a lot of other services where I mean, old Yahoo, like when it first began, even pre-Google days, I know this is like here, listen to the dinosaur talking about it, but Yahoo began as a service of web page curation with gigantic directories of, like think of Reddit with all its subdirectories. Yahoo was sort of like a corporately organized and controlled things. People even had jobs. Basically, their job was, you're going to cover this this subdirectory, and you're going to search for all the web pages and add those in there. And that, of course, nowadays seems like really quaint, and I guess maybe that's where Yahoo, kind of lost whatever it had in its early, early success or something. But when Google came about, then the algorithm began to rate and organize pages for us, and I find that much less like a well-organized hierarchy of information, and much more something that it seems to me inhumanly intelligent, the way that it can organize something useful to us out of these incredible quantities of pages and information and stuff. So anyhow, I should not talk so much because it just pulls us into all kinds of
Rabbit hole?
associations. Yeah, rabbit holes, exactly, Rick. and I guess in the chapter, I believe that it does provide us just with. I'm just looking here for a contrast. If it wasn't in this chapter, it is in another chapter. But just the difference between what they called instrumental. Oh, this is a beautiful, beautiful whiteboard marker. Instrumental versus ritualistic use of the online medium. So instrumental is where you clearly have a purpose. I'm going to look for information about the CW's programming strategy or something. So I have a clear desire. So you've got a clear purpose in what you're doing, versus the ritualistic behavior, which is sitting down and say, oh, I got a half hour. And so this, would cover the rabbit hole. But it's also meant to cover, killing time or spending 30 minutes not really knowing where you're going, but you're just enjoying the whole experience of, going down the rabbit hole or finding out more about stuff. So I knew we could connect that rabbit hole to something instrumental that's in the course content for this week. Let's take a further look at more of these slides here before we get into later stuff. So the internet world, taking a look here.
Is critical mass 50 million?
This is a point where people started talking about the internet as a mass medium. So that was basically the point there. Because it's another really interesting thing about it as a communication system is its scalability. That you could have a very small number of users involved in some content. You can have a massive amount of users on the latest the latest craze, and the system can basically cover it all. Yeah. Well, I think looking through this slide anyway, one thing that stands out to me that's very important is the development of broadband internet, and how that was a very important part of getting us to where we are nowadays, which is the ability to stream audio and video. So you guys probably have heard or remember, the early way to connect to the internet was through a modem, and it communicated using regular phone lines, converting data into actual audio signals. So there was that weird sign in, the modem connecting to your client computer at your house to the web server through your internet service provider. And that all worked at a very slow 56 kilobits per second, extremely slow, which was nowhere near fast enough necessary to actually stream audio and video. But as more and more people got, either DSL, which was a telephone-based broadband internet connection, or through a cable modem through a cable provider, speeds picked up on the order of like 100 times faster than the 56 kilobit per second connection. And then it became possible to stream audio and video. Sort of in the 2002, 2003, again, you cross a threshold where enough households have broadband connectivity, and that means that the content providers now have, a motive for putting up a lot of audio and video content. Just prior to that, some people did have fast internet connection, but wasn't enough of the population to, it wasn't the critical mass necessary to justify a YouTube. Some other, is it not broken, I hope? Yeah, love those cases. So bandwidth is, it's a real constraint on what kind of content that people can consume. And I guess nowadays, this is again, sort of something that within 10 or 15 years has pretty much been surmounted. At least in, our rich countries, broadband is the norm. But that was, the principal constraint over data transfer. And because audio and video take a lot of data, to display like a YouTube video or something, that's kind of what was holding it back. So bandwidth is, a major constraint. And it took broadband rollout in order to really get over that hurdle. Similar things, in the cell phone technologies that we've been using, it's only since 3G that we've been able to, have shared digital content at a speed necessary for audio and video streaming, let's say. And nowadays we really count on it, basically, for all of our personal media needs that we have on our phone. So I think that's what's most important there. The video pointed out, well, here we go. So a number of this is like basically a list of the key technologies that are involved there, right? So again, we did talk about the internet being a packet-switched network. Basically, the information can find the most efficient way through the network. In fact, a page, on the web is composed of, text, which may be in an HTML file. The HTML will also call out for video, images, audio, which will load into the page. If the page is, part of an ad-serving network, that page will also call out to, ad servers, which will place ads in given spaces on the page. There may even be behind those ads like a little automated auction, which is one of the really cool things. Sometimes that can slow your page down ever so slightly, as when that page is loading up. There's also a two-way communication of cookies that are on your computer that have been stored there as you surf other sites will get sent to the ad server, and it'll say, oh, you've done a lot of time looking at athletic shoes or something, so we know that much about you. Let's look in our database of people who are interested in advertising, who rated athletic shoes pretty high, and let's see what they said they were willing to pay for a display ad. And so then there's a little kind of auction, basically call it an auction, going on there as the highest bidder on that particular profile that you offer based on the cookies on your computer will then determine what ad actually gets sent and displayed on your page. So all of this is data that's coming to you through the packet switch network. And at some point, the ad server may be in another country, or the data from the ad server may be passing through a completely different route than the content or the photographs. So this is very flexible, the most efficient use of client server. We talked about you are the client. The web server is where the information resides. It's getting sent to you. The router switches the information through the network down the most efficient path. So TCP was the early transfer control protocol. That was what Vint Cerf was working on, father of the internet. IP, Internet Protocol. So this is taking, let's say, they're basically layers. Transmission control protocol was like, okay, how do individual computers connect together? Internet protocol, well, now you're going to put them all on this distributed network and give each of them an address. So that works out how computers can connect across these global networks, basically. DNS, we mentioned, well, in the video it mentioned that the addresses themselves are basically controlled and assigned by the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. So what this basically does is, when you establish a server, you're going to get, it's got basically a machine language name, an address on it. And every item on the server is going to have, a URL, a uniform resource locator. So all of this stuff is organized that way. There's an interesting reading on this week's tab. I don't know if you get to it this week. We got a lot on our plates with the upcoming quiz and the essay that's due on February 28th. But this is a pretty quick read about the ICANN key holders getting together. So basically, this is it's a corporation. It's a corporation with members from countries across the world. They basically control the DNS system. So it's a very important part of the web that they control. And it's just a description of the security and the meeting that they have as they establish new practices for ICANN, basically, because the number of pages and the need for this just keeps on growing. And also security security concerns about attacks on the DNS, which is, that's one way that people harass web users and web hosts and such, is by attacking them through the DNS system. So it's an interesting little article there, and also to realize that it's not the United Nations that runs this thing. It's actually a private corporation on which the entire web system as we have it now depends. So that's an interesting, kind of powerful position there. The development of web browsers in the mid-90s was real important. So this gives a graphical interface to what the Berners-Lee worked out in terms of HTML and hyperlinking of resources. So that's what he had at CERN, which was okay for a bunch of physics researchers to share their research papers together. But for the web to look like the web as we have it today, it required the creation of a browser. And so as a grad school computer project, a guy named Mark Andreessen developed a browser which was called Mosaic, and so that was a graphical browser that would, display web pages as text and hyperlinks, and eventually images and such. So Mosaic was commercialized as Netscape, and that basically everybody had Netscape for a year or two. It was such an innovation, and it really made the web as we know it. Microsoft tried to put Netscape out of business by bundling Internet Explorer with all of Windows. And in Europe, they were successfully, prosecuted as for antitrust, basically saying you guys are trying to create a monopoly by, you're trying to put everybody out of business. We eventually had the development. Firefox is based on Netscape, and Netscape was based on Mosaic. And we have obviously other browsers that we use as preferences, but that's another important part of it all. And once we have that, plus broadband, then we start getting old media joining in, putting their content up on new media. So those are the essential technical pieces of the internet and the web as we know it today. So I'm just wondering how deep we want to go into this, because we do want to get into those Kahoots. I say we call it for today, and then next class after the exam or the quiz, we can get into this. But I also next class want to talk about, let's get seriously into the research paper that's coming up. Which, if you're worried or if you're wondering or et cetera, remember that the research paper prompt is up here under research paper number 1, due on February 28th. And there's also the general guidelines for both the research papers, because we have another one at the end of semester. It's also up there. So we're going to look into that after the quiz next class. Everybody should be here next class to take the quiz. It was one of those, we have only a few days out of the semester where we're all supposed to be here. And is it here? It isn't. Okay, that's interesting. BCST 100. Why did I think that was there? All right. Well, I didn't say it then, so feel free to take this quiz online as well as in person. This is interesting. I could swear that I saw this written down this morning. Okay, well, I'm glad I didn't tell you the wrong thing, because the syllabus is our deal. So let's look at quiz 1 review. And if I look in the modules, and I am looking at, that's this week, we're in week 6. And quiz 1 review is just right at the very end of week 5. You can also just drag it into week 6. Just drag it into week 6, so it's going to be right next to quiz 1. So there's the review. All right. So our quiz is 25 multiple choice or true-false questions. You can, now it seems clear to me, you can take it online or you can take it in class. If you take it online, I think it has a 30-minute time limit. And let's just click on this. It'll open up when class opens up, and it'll close at noon. So the quiz is open from 10 to noon on Thursday the 21st.
Wait, so you can take the quiz online?
Yeah, I have to do that. It's, yep, because in the syllabus, again, I'm totally mystified, but in the syllabus, I did not put that you have to come in. So,
Oh dear.
yep. So you can take it online or you can take it in class, whichever way works better for you. Okay. So let's just take a look at what's on the quiz. So I have, taken all the slides with the important information that's on the quiz. So, this is 1, 2, 3, and this is chapter 4. So if you want to, one way you can come at it is by looking at these slides, and won't take too long on it, but where you see stuff in red is information that you should know for the quiz. So that's one way to review. No, I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to minimize on the screen. Minimize embedded content. Now the other way is to play these Kahoot challenges. So we've been using Kahoots in class, and we can use them again today just to rehearse a little bit. But I also generated what are called challenges. So these are Kahoots you can actually play yourself on your phone. Unfortunately, I don't know why they do this, but they can't be played in a browser. You need their app on the phone in order to play these challenges. So basically what they are, they're like multiple choice review quizzes that you can use. And questions on the exam are, like a subset of these. The wording may not be exactly the same. The options may not be exactly the same, but they're close. So you can use these to rehearse. All right, so I propose now that we look through these, and again, especially for those who may not have a chance to use the Kahoots or something, this is probably a good way of getting to know the review content. So let's just see here. I'm going to participate. If I can ever open the app. Really? Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Sorry, this is taking me a while. All right, thank you, Rick. Rick is in. Okay, there we go. So we're at 397, 752. Okay, can you go? Oh, I'm in there too. All right. Oh, all right. Thank you to those streaming for participating. It's just, you may find so much lag that it's not much fun to play this while you're streaming. I don't know how that affects it, but we'll see. All right, we got 9 questions based on chapter 1. Let's take a look. Whose model of communication is known as the mathematical model? Okay. Schramm, McLuhan, Shannon, and Weaver, or Schramm and Osgood? Sometimes there's music that plays. Okay. Well, all right. 4 people got Shannon and Weaver, right? So that's the mathematical model of communication. Whoops. Take these out of circulation. Remember, it looks like, so you got a sender, you got a receiver, you got a channel, you got feedback from the receiver. So this is what they call the mathematical model. All right, let's move on to the next one. Definitely cannot lecture while we're doing all this. Which is considered the nation's first mass medium? Radio, telegraph, internet, newspapers. Let's take a look. All right. How we doing? Yep, that's good. The newspapers are first mass medium. Convergence happens when different types of media become the same. All right, so middling response there. So it is true, convergence means, media that we once considered separate, unique, are now converging together. Your cell phone is a great example of, basically many types of communication converging together within one system. Localism doesn't matter to radio stations anymore. So as we talked about the, let's see, okay, 3 and 2. So localism does matter as radio stations attempt to compete with online music services. There's very little that they can offer beyond, the ability to present local content on radio. So it is important. What do you call messages that are received almost instantaneously after transmission? So in other words, you're watching the Super Bowl and you're seeing, the game as it's played with maybe like a 10-second delay for bleeping stuff out or something. But otherwise, it's live. So what do you call that? Yeah, that's called synchronous. So what is synchronized together is the actual event and its broadcasting. That is compared to asynchronous, which would be media that you consume a long time after something happened. What is probably the most revolutionary innovation since the printing press, according to the book? Digitization of mediated content, convergence, consolidation, monetizing the marketplace of ideas. According to the book, which would be lovely, lovely. 4 people got it. Digitization of mediated content. Remember, there's that timeline which shows the inventions, and it's just after digitization, the number of innovations that happens just explodes. Digital lets stations offer multiple channels in their frequency. We're talking about radio stations. Yeah. So true or false here? Okay, correct. Woo! No reason to even talk about that one. Everyone's got it right. That's fantastic. Which kind of an effect is it when we learn from the mass media? So remember, there's a typology of effects. Is it cognitive? Is it physical? Is it emotional? Or is it behavioral in terms of when we learn something? All right, and again, pretty good, cognitive. So when we're learning, cognition refers to our intelligence. That's what we're developing. And finally, which of the following statements is true? Well, let's see those statements. The internet has full First Amendment protection. The FCC treats subscription media different than broadcast. The fairness doctrine is no longer in place. And number 4, it's all true. All right, we did okay there. So it's all true. Let's just see, some people were, so the one that nobody got, the internet has full First Amendment protection. And that is true with the exception of obscene content, which is actually dealt with by the states. The First Amendment to the Constitution, which is a federal guarantee that the government will not come in and censor our speech. The internet is part of that, definitely. However, there are exceptions to it regarding obscene content. All right, that was our first Kahoot. Well done, folks. Let's go for one on chapter 2. Where are we here? Am I backing out? I want to go to Kahoots again. And let's check out chapter 2. God. Forgive me while I scroll, and I just scroll past chapter 2. Boom. Let's do it. Play it. Classic. We've got 4 chapters we have to do, so I think we'll fit it into this time. Come on, classic. Got it. Ready to join. Okay, come on. How do I do a new one? Jesus. Sorry, folks. Guess if I reload 397, 311. Enter that. Okay, and okay, go. We're in. That's the current pin. And let's start. Boom. All right. There. You can still join using that pin. Okay. Talking radio history. David Sarnoff's radio music box memo described a way to make money from broadcast radio. True or false? Good, true. So you may remember that early on in the history of radio, there was a little confusion as to what it was actually going to be used for. But the initial idea for radio as a mass medium was floated by Sarnoff, who said, hey, we can play music in the home this way. Next up, radio news was controversial. The press-radio war happened, settled by the Biltmore Agreement. Cool. So mostly everybody got it right. This was a pretty key moment in the development of broadcast news, where prior to the Biltmore Agreement, everyone was freezing out radio news, and they came to an agreement with newspapers. Who invented FM radio? Heinrich Hertz, Fessenden, Armstrong, or Marconi? Who we're waiting on. That's pretty good. Yep. Howard Armstrong's. Remember Armstrong, the genius inventor who was frozen out by Sarnoff? FM was held back. It did not take off until the 1960s. And Armstrong, as brilliant as he was, wound up committing suicide as fighting with NBC took its toll. Who proved that electromagnetic energy traveled through the air? Was it Morse? Was it Hertz? Was it Fessenden? Was it Marconi? All right, pretty good. So it was Heinrich Hertz. So if you were fooled by Marconi or Fessenden, they were, key in the development of radio. But the physicist who demonstrated electromagnetic energy was Hertz. Okay, Lee DeForest, more inventor questions. What did Lee DeForest make? The Audion, the diode tube, the F valve, or all of those inventions? All right, so the correct answer was the Audion. Nobody got the F valve. I wonder why. So the Audion tube was DeForest's amplifier, to which he went to war with Armstrong. Armstrong said it infringed his patents. Congress has the right to regulate broadcasting because A, the airways belong to the people. B, the American broadcast system is a commercial enterprise. C, early unregulated radio generated too much noise. D, both A, the airways belong to the people, and C, early unregulated radio generated too much noise. So which would be the right answer there? All right, so number one, the airways belong to the people. That's what gives Congress the right to regulate. Question 7, what we today refer to as a network, what was that called in the 1920s? Sorry about the ABCs and stuff, so choose by color. Was it shuttle broadcasting, chain broadcasting, spoke broadcasting, or none of the above? All right, excellent. Chain broadcasting, no need to explain. Prior to the Radio Act of 1927, what was the situation? Stations were encouraged to take turns broadcasting. Legislation was inadequate to regulate commercial radio. All radio stations broadcast on the same frequency, or perhaps all of the above. Okay, correct answer is D, all of the above. Okay, so it was a pretty chaotic situation before the Radio Act basically cleaned things up, made radio business or possible business. Westinghouse was interested in broadcasting because it would what? Allow them to sell more radio receivers, make more revenue from advertising, improve the moral climate of wholesome entertainment, or D, all of the above. Okay, correct answer was red. Allow them to sell more radio receivers. After World War I, ATT, RCA, Westinghouse, they divided up the business so that ATT would connect the affiliate stations through their long distance lines. Westinghouse would build receivers, and RCA, through its NBC company, would produce programming as a network. So they basically divided up the radio business that way. Radio stations profited during World War II because advertisers bought radio ads instead of print. True, most people got it. So yep, there wasn't enough newspaper to go around, and so radio got a lot of advertising. Good job, folks. All right. Let us go on to a new game. We'll do Chapter 3. And again, my scrolling wheel. There it is, Chapter 3. Okay, let's play one. And a classic. U pin number 162617. Okay. right, you guys can still join us with the pin that's up there, and just checking our friends in chat. 162-617, let's get started. Oh, in 1961, who referred to television as a vast wasteland? Was it Marlon Perkins, Theodore Sturgeon, Monroe Trout Jr., or Newton Minow? And excellent, everybody got it. Newton Minow was big on public broadcasting. So he felt that commercial broadcasting was a vast wasteland. FM radio had better quality than AM. Broadcasters immediately switched over to FM radio. True. All right, so the answer is false. FM radio was better, but they couldn't switch over to broadcasting in FM because Sarnoff blocked it and was hoping that people would be buying television sets. So FM didn't take off till the 1960s. Who was associated with the invention of television? Frank Lloyd Wright, Walt Disney, Benjamin A. Britten, or Philo T. Farnsworth? All right, everybody got that? So Philo was considered the inventor. In addition, we had Vladimir Zwiorkin, right, who worked for NBC RCA. We had John Logie Baird, who had an original mechanical television system a long time before the electronic system worked. Okay. Sarnoff thought radio could make money by becoming something in the home. What was it? A music box, a babysitter, a telegraph, a newspaper? Yep, Sarnoff was big on the music box idea. It's very prescient. Just as with radio, early television was dominated by networks. True or false? True, okay? So in fact, the networks were the same. All the radio networks went into television. We did see that the Dumont network was a little bit of an outlier, something different. A TV station that associates with a network to play all of its programs is called a or an affiliate, a superstation, a repeater, a syndicator. What would it be? An affiliate. Excellent, excellent. Okay, and next up. Television made its first public debut when? 1939 at the World's Fair, 1926 at Macy's, 1945 when the atomic bomb was dropped. Okay, everybody got the World's Fair. Excellent. Cable television originally started to bring TV into remote areas where reception was bad, as a joint venture with AT&T and local telephone companies, as an experiment for two-way communications, in hopes of competing with movie theaters. What would that be? All right, the correct answer was to bring TV into remote areas where reception was bad. Okay. So originally, cable television simply rebroadcast broadcast TV and over a wire so that people could see it better. The Advanced Television Systems Committee, ATSC, adopted the broadcast standard used as HD TV. So you say that's true or false? So it's true. So let's see, why would we get confused about that? Well, there's a lot of acronyms there. So NTSC was from approximately 1949 to 2009, was the standard for television, which, as you remember, was like little 4x3 almost square TV. Color or black and white was NTSC. After 2009 to present, we have widescreen, 16:9, HD TV, which we call it high definition television, and of course we are now moving into 4K as well. And so this was the ATSC, which created that standard. So we have the NTSC after 2009, ATSC after 2008. Over the top, OTT, is our settings used to limit excessive violence on home TVs, streaming services that provide content directly to audiences, taxation of satellite-delivered television content, extending the prime time period by an hour per night. So what would be up there? Let's get into it. All right, streaming services that provide content directly to audiences, okay? So OTT, over the top, which is typically what we say when someone's behavior is a little bit out of the ordinary. If this was your television, it would have a little cable top box. And OTT describes the internet, which is this wire coming over the cable box and plugging directly into your smart TV, okay? So this is a very industry-oriented concept. Cable companies used to have the monopoly on what came into your wired television. No more. Now you can plug an Ethernet cable directly and get those smart TV channels. So they call that over the top, OTT, and they mean over the top of your television cable box. All right. We're going to go to one more, play a new game, and don't know if we really have time for this. Folks, if you have to leave at 11:20, go for it. But otherwise, let's play this last one. To number 4, because it is time. Chapter 4. Let's play this one. Classic. Got pin number in there. 793062. And just to get this moving along, I'm going to start it right away. I can't start it right away, so somebody's in there. CJ's in there. Thank you, CJ. We can start this right away. Anybody else wants to join? 793062 is it. A network schedules a new or weak program between two strong programs. What do you call that? So it looks like this. You got two strong programs and there's the weak program. What's that called? So that is called hammocking. All right. Looks like a hammock. Two strong, one weak. All right, next one up. A network program places 4 situations comedies in a 2-hour period. So let's say it is Thursday night and you got 4 sitcoms, one after the other. Seinfeld, Frasier, etc. So what would that be called? And a 4th one, whatever it is. Okay. What would that be called? I didn't log into this one. So. All right, blocking. That is correct. You're making a block of programming. Nice. Next one. The network programs a show so that it runs over the starting time of the next program. What is that called? Bridging, hammocking, blocking, templating. Bridging, everybody got that. That's bridging, when you bridge from one show to the next. ESPN is what? A broadcast network, a superstation, a cable network, or a pay-per-view channel? What would that be? Okay, ESPN is a cable network. Awesome. How I Met Your Mother, first broadcast on CBS, now in syndication, reruns, is an example of what? A first-run syndicated program, first network syndicated, all network, or off network? What is the correct term? And the correct term is off network, okay? Because it was originated by CBS when it was on a network, and when it's in reruns, it's called off network. All right? To differentiate themselves, radio stations program music according to a specific what? advertiser, format, country, or rate card. So this is the idea that at a certain period in its history, radio stations realized, oh, we can do better if we each play a specific what? Format, absolutely correct. So country as a format, oldies as a format. A big reason radio could reinvent itself in the late 50s was what? The FM band, the LP record, rock and roll music, or advertisers? And what do we get? Rock and roll, that's correct. Got a lot of people listening to radio. Another name for the program wheel used to schedule radio shows, so that looks like this, and we schedule different radio events in there. That is called what? A hot clock? It is a hot clock. Everybody got it. Excellent. Number 9, a song played very often on music radio is said to be in heavy what? Airplay, payola, rotation, or promotion? Rotation. Excellent. And finally, non-commercial radio stations such as KQED get underwriting rather than advertising. True or false? All right, that is true. Excellent. That's the end of our review. Sorry, it took a couple of extra minutes. So next class, we'll start with the quiz, and those who want to take it at home can take it at home. And those who are here, I'll be happy to see you here. All right, cheers. Have a good one. And remember, you can play these quizzes at home as well with the challenges.